Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Isolan Expert Roundtable. Today's topic is something that is integral to the very discipline of marketing. It's creativity. And as B2B marketers, all of us face sometimes the challenge of integrating creativity. Is it relevant? Is it needed? Should it be done within all of our marketing campaigns? And to discuss this topic, I have here with me today three influential marketers and experts in the world of B2B marketing. First, I have Jennifer Gregory, a content marketing expert. Pam Didner is a B2B marketing consultant, author, and speaker. And Ruth Stevens is a B2B marketing educationalist, consultant, and writer. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for joining us on this roundtable.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Let's jump straight into the topic, which is creativity. As B2B marketers, we've all tried, I think, we all recognize the role of creativity, but can you just describe how important is creativity in the crowded world of content? How do you come up with ideas? Can you go too far? And so on and so forth. Ruth, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. It's a really important topic because we were all brought up to believe that business buyers are only interested in facts and they're buying on behalf of their companies, so they want enough information to be able to justify the sale, and they're very serious, and that in consideration of these factors that we in marketing communications need to be pretty dull and not really entertaining, and we need to focus on specific information and education and so forth. And we're learning over the years that business buyers are still human beings, and we can actually appeal to them through emotional vehicles, through humor, through through storytelling, and those are where creativity can really make a difference. So it's a new world for business-to-business marketing. Anybody else want to take a crack?
Yeah. So Anu, can I go ahead next if that's okay with you? All right, very good. Well, Ruth, I 100% agree with you, Ruth, to some extent that you are totally right. B2B buyers are still humans. And in addition to showing them the facts that they need to validate their purchase, it's also very, very important to build that personal connection with them. Obviously, there are multiple ways to do that, through content that we share with them and make the content educational and fun at the same time. That's one way of doing it. I think another one is actually building a personal relationship with them. And through that can be done in multiple different ways, obviously. One is that it's the frequent or targeted outreach, but don't do the outreach for the sake of outreach, but make it very intentional in terms of sharing certain kind of content or find out how they are doing, how they are using our products. And the other one is actually sales engagements. Our sales sides, what our salespeople are doing to engage with them in their own way. And can they use certain kind of creativity or creative ideas as a conversation openers to further drive that conversation to facilitate the purchase cycles, if you will. Can we go too far? Yes, I think to some extent we probably can. And obviously creative have some sort of boundary. And if you get too far, and I think the word that we usually use is called on brand. And I remember when I was in the corporate world, and when a creative concept was developed, and a lot of time our senior management will ask if this is on brand. And it's very difficult to say, is it on brand or not? And in general, for example, at least at Intel at that time, pretty much 5 or 6 years ago, and they changed the brand persona, you know, the personality of brand over a period of time. Way back then, you know, the one that we have is bold, optimistic, passionate, and unexpected. Right? So these are the 4 brand persona. Obviously, when we develop the creative concepts, we want to make sure it's somehow aligned with that. And even you do humor, you want to make sure that it's somehow aligned with it. And even down to the animation type of characters that we choose. And I remember we actually did a sketch. We actually we did a sketch. Basically, it's like 2 IT manager talking in sauna, right? So they are having a kind of like towel wrap around them, and they have a conversation, and that was very bold. That's very unexpected, but it's not necessarily on brand. We don't think our IT manager will actually resonate with that, so we try to expand our boundary a little bit, but at the end we kill that idea because it's not on brand. Does that make sense? So we try to align with the brand persona, but I think, yes, there are times depending on what you are thinking in terms of your creative ideas, and you can go a little bit too far. If that's the case, you have to ask yourself, if does that represent our brand? So, all right, back to you, Anu.
That's absolutely right, Pam. And that's, you know, that's a question that I have, or that's a sort of remarks we have heard from clients time and time again, which is that, you know, this is just a little bit too far for us, we feel uncomfortable, etc. Jennifer, what do you think? Can you, you know, should all brands focus on creativity, and how important is it for all brands to be creative, and how should brands define creativity? What do you think?
I think that it's exceptionally important, and especially, as you mentioned, in the crowded world of content, and especially with the influence of social media, that's where you get the amplification of your message, is when it appeals to people as humans, because people are sharing things on social media that touch them personally or they find interesting or unique. So you get new eyeballs when you catch the social media attention. And I think the point of can you go too far is, and I totally agree that one, it has to be on brand, but I think another consideration as well is your target audience and what they are going to find interesting. And that can even, a brand has multiple audiences within the same brand. So a technology product for their manufacturing or for their manufacturing sector is going to have a different humor creativity than for their education sector, because they're totally different audiences. So, and I think that you combine what your audience is going to think too far. You want to push the envelope without offending them. You want to make them think and it be interesting in a good way. And that's a fine line. And I think that a lot of the way you find out where you want to hit the line right there, and it can be thin. So I think by testing your messages with target users is a really good way to find out if you're at the line or over it. And I want to point out too that it doesn't matter if some people don't like your messages or think it's over the line. It needs to be your target audience that finds it interesting. Ann Hanley had a great quote that I heard several years ago that I really take to heart, which is you want to attract the like-minded and repel the different. So people that are going to be interested in your company, as long as they find it not too much, it's okay if not everybody likes it. And in some ways, the companies that have had the best success are those that live by that rule.
Well, it's interesting that, you know, all of you have mentioned humor in some way. And a lot of tech B2B brands and B2B brands in general are creating content for global audiences. So, and Jennifer, you talked about research just now and testing whether it's going too far, it's offensive, etc. And where do you stand with this? I mean, is humor a dangerous tool to use when you're running a global B2B campaign? How do we account for the fact that what one group finds hilariously funny, another group might find offensive. Pam, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I do actually. So a global campaign is actually pretty hard, and especially if you are running around the world and everybody have a different religious belief, everybody have a different holiday celebration, and there's a specific type of cultural differences. So there are obviously some commonality you can go after. For example, it doesn't matter what we are. All of us have aspirations. We want to make sure that our kids excel. We want to make sure our living standard being elevated. We want to make sure we have a certain kind of financial security. So the messaging can be very similar or the same across the globe, but the creativity that you use may be a little bit different. For example, I remember when we actually tried to determine savings when I was in the corporate world, right? And we were thinking about what is some sort of creative that we can show that, hey, you know what, if you're using our processors, you can save money and also enhance your performance. So on one of the creative, we actually show piggy bank. You think piggy bank is actually pretty common, right? It showed that the piggy bank, you save money, you put the coins like, in the piggy bank. But we feel that pig, on the certain culture, and especially that is actually no, right? So there's in-depth conversation that even we want to show savings, that the creative concept or the visual that we use needs to be different. And I think that's why there are some brands, rather than using a very specific visual to show what the saving is, they use icons. And the one thing that I think IBM did very, very well way back then is IBM Smarter Planet campaigns. They use a lot of different icons and the patterns, and to show the savings, to show the performance. And that may not be a bad idea when you are thinking about you want to scale in terms of your creative concept across different globe, and you use icon visuals and pattern to do it. Because the pattern, it's a little bit more abstract and it's actually easier to convey the ideas. But I'm not saying that creative concept applies to everybody. That's not my point, but it's much easier to standardize. Does that make sense? So that's my 2
Absolutely.
cents.
No, I think that makes sense, and it's a case of being sensitive to local taboos, to things
Yep.
that might be mocked and so on.
Yeah.
Ruth, what do you have anything to add on this one? I know you spent extensive amounts of time in India teaching. What do you find in terms of the cultural mixes and sensitivities there?
Yeah, that's I really echo what Pam said, and she is the undisputed expert in global B2B marketing communications. So I'm always learning from her. This is why most large enterprises who are trying to run campaigns around the world will delegate responsibility for much of the creative to the local team to make sure that it's consistent with the local culture and practices. And I'm really glad you brought up the subject, Anu, of humor, because it has been proven again and again to be a really dangerous area for marketing communicators to play in. And one man's humor can be another man's insult, and we really do have to tread carefully. So I would reiterate what Jennifer said about testing, and also the idea that she put forward about picking your audience on a functional level. We all know that engineers have a different level of humor than, say, finance people. So, that's something that it can help us stay in our lane and keep out of trouble.
Definitely. And what about shock tactics? Is that something that that might work? Painting, the other picture and just to startle people into action, Jennifer?
I would be cautious about doing that. I think that that's where you really can run the risk of going too far. I mean, some brands, this goes back to being on brand. Some brands, that's how they define themselves, is the shock tactics and really pushing the edge. So I think it really comes back to the points we've all said about the audience and your brand. But I think that that's an area to really tread cautiously and, you know, quadruple check your testing, right?
What if you don't have budgets for research? Is there anything we can use as a proxy? You know, I can't run focus groups in all of my markets. What can I do?
I have an idea on that front. I've had great results with what I call grandmother research, which is basically me or the marketing manager just calling up a couple of people, and it's statistically absolutely not reliable. But especially in the area of creative, you can get some pretty useful insights just by that informal conversation. So it's my suggestion.
I totally agree with that, and I've had some great suggestions. And if you're gonna, with the times that I have done that as well, I have I tried to get different people. So I've had a man, a woman. I've done a couple different age groups within my target audience too. But I agree, it's worked very well, and it's saved me from making some embarrassing mistakes with some content as well.
A couple things I want to share extend pretty much Ruth and Jennifer's point of view. I think leveraging salespeople can be another way that the sales are very close to the buyers, and also a specific target of audience they go after. So asking sales in terms of your creative idea doesn't hurt, or even through sales and talk to some of our key customers, that can be another option. Another thing that you mentioned, Anu, in terms of no budget, and if you do any kind of A/B testing on Facebooks or even on Twitters, or even using your own email campaigns of doing different subject titles and also different content of the same email, you know, the two different type of email, but the same serve the same purposes, if you will. And you send them out and then see what kind of email got actually higher open rate or responses. That probably can also give you a signal in terms of if that messaging or the creative working. So I think they are, research that you can do if you have a huge amount of budget, but they are also research that you can do that require no budget or little budget, but it does require time and effort. So.
It definitely needs you to commit to it and to want to do it.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've talked about, you know, humor and interactive and shock, but one of the techniques, I mean, as technology and marketing technology has improved, one of the main avenues for creativity I find today is interactivity. And there's so much of scope to do interactive content that draws your viewers in or draws your audiences in and gets them more engaged. What does this group think about interactive content? Is it an avenue for creativity? Is the time not now yet, or what are we feeling about it?
I think now is the perfect time, and I also think it goes along with our audience's expectations of personalization, because when you give someone the ability to control their experience, they're creating a personal experience. And as marketers, we talk a lot about our customers and the personalization aspect of marketing and customer experience, and I think that really draws it into content marketing. I think that as marketers, we need to look at every piece of content when possible and see how can we help someone personalize this through interactivity, whether it be calculators, whether it be, them setting parameters, whether it be them, using the information we know about them to change the photo or the headline, because we have that capability as well to personalize to that level.
Sure, yeah, I agree. And I've seen interactivity in content growing ever more rapidly over the last 5 or so years as creativity has become unleashed. But I also caution people about considering the buyer's perspective very carefully, because sometimes we get enamored of our ideas and we think they're so cool, and they're actually getting in the way of the buyer's ideal experience, maybe even being an impediment to their understanding of our message. And it's really because using whiz-bang stuff, gamification, for example, virtual reality, augmented reality, some of it it's so appealing to us as marketers because it seems fresh and exciting to us, and it's the new shiny bullet, but we forget that from the customer's perspective, it could be a source of annoyance. So I guess in summary, I would say, let's not use interactive tools for their own sake. Let's use them if they have business value.
Yeah, so Ruth, I actually agree with you in terms from that perspective. So I do agree that creativity or using specific technology to drive the interaction is very, very important. And also interaction can come into multiple different ways, right? I mean, if you give quizzes, especially if on the B2C side, BuzzFeed, for example, they do that all the time, testing your personality, testing your, your preference, and using quizzes to actually engage with people. And if you actually do that on a B2B side, you need to be very intentional. If you want to do that, and as a part of the content, what purpose does it serve? Does that actually help us to gain insight, or does that help our audience to actually get more value, to understand like what our products are about? So when you talk about the interactive communications, then you have to think through in terms of in what format and also what purpose, and how does that serve at the different stage of the purchasing cycle. And another thing that was kind of important, especially on the client side, what I have done in terms of different type and the formats of content, is any kind of interactive content is a whole lot more costly than just a static content. Okay, if you create one video, you create one video. But if you create a video or a calculator that's interactive, the cost actually goes up. So on the corporate side, you have to kind of balance that in terms of, okay, if I want to do something that's more interactive, it's a budget discussion. Does that make sense? You have the fixed amount of budget, and you may have a multiple pieces of content that you need to create. Then you have to determine, for the interaction that you want to drive, does that provide any value for your target audience? Does it make sense? So in addition to the creativity discussion, Anu, I personally think it's also a budget discussion, right? It's a trade-off that the corporate marketing managers, they need to make, or the client side, the marketing manager need to make in terms of what kind of content needs to create, and then determine if does that make sense. And when I was working in the corporate side, we do actually do quite a bit of interactive content, but the content that we created is more calculator related. If we sell servers, we want to check their power capacities. And if their power capacity is much higher and using the older generation of the servers, they are not saving money for the company. So the interactive content we created is actually a calculator to actually help them determine their power consumption, then to determine should they actually replace their current servers. So that provide a purpose to them, but it's not very fun, to be honest, but it serves a purpose. So, and that type of calculator to be created is not cheap. It's actually substantially more expensive than probably 10 pieces of a PDF I have to create. Then all of a sudden it's a balanced discussion and a trade-off discussion.
No, that's absolutely true. And in these days when budgets are under such humongous scrutiny, I mean, there's a need to make every marketing dollar work. But there's also, when it comes to items like interactive calculators, planners, and all of that, it's almost seen at the moment as a luxury. And many companies they're just hunkering down and saying, let me just keep my basic visibility and my basic content flow out there without really trying anything whiz bang. So my question was, is there any?
Can I actually add one more point on that? And
Definitely.
I'm sorry about that. I do agree that the budget plays a huge role, but that doesn't mean you should scale back because your budget is limited. I know that major brands or even mid-sized company, a lot of time they do have some sort of strategic collaboration or co-marketing between two brands. For example, Intel and HP. Or Cloudflare with some other key customers. You can always partner with your customers or your vendor, and both company pitch in. And you put half of the money, I put half of the money, and actually still create an interactive content calculator, for example, right? And you guys can co-brand it together. So even if you don't have budget or your budget is scaled back, there are other ways to get more budget. It does require some time to work with your sales team, with your partners, with your vendors, and then drive that discussion and then pull the money together. So that's another way. Back to you.
Creativity and budget planning as well.
True.
The other question I had was, in terms of messaging, can one get creative with, okay, let's say we only have budget for a blog, or our campaign is now scaled back to just keeping the blog up to, or the resource center, on a maintenance mode for the next 2 or 3 months, which is the reality that many tech B2B brands are facing today. Many brands are facing today. So can we be a little bit more creative, or are there ways of being more creative with just basic content? So the messaging, can we tweak messaging, or is that a path that we need to tread very lightly? Do you have any advice?
I do. I'm reminded of the famous Wall Street Journal subscription solicitation letter, where the copywriter opened the letter with the story of 2 young men who were strolling down the street, and one of them was a reader of the Wall Street Journal and the other wasn't. And fast forward 30 years ahead, and the reader fellow was in a senior executive position and the other one had fallen behind in his career. And that story is really one of the great fables of business to business marketing communications, but illustrates the point that I'd like to make, which is that great storytelling costs nothing, in the sense of you don't need to build a technology or hire a big fancy agency. You just need an excellent copywriter.
Okay.
Now, excellent copywriting excellence, it does not necessarily come cheap either, but my point is that I think the lowest expense and the highest value creative driven improvement can be achieved through telling a story around your product, your customer, your service, or your business outcomes.
I'd like to add that I think that it's important to really stay relevant as well when you're talking about creativity and messaging. I think right now during the COVID crisis, we're seeing a lot of brands do that some do it very well, because right now, as you were talking about some cheap and informal ways, right now content of someone shooting a video on an iPhone at home is really acceptable. And it's actually really appealing to people even more because they're in that same situation. So I think that formal slick content right now is not feeling real to people, but the raw, authentic, informal stuff is suddenly very acceptable. And I think as marketers, we have to be able to quickly shift, read the audience, and know when it's time to move quickly. I'm seeing some great examples of people talking in their house that is really resonating with people.
From my perspective, I think on the B2B side, and specifically, a lot of time our messaging is closely tied with our product positioning, right? So how we feature our products and that will directly impact what the messaging framework or what are some of the talking points that we want to say. And then from there, just like Ruth indicated, if you actually have excellent copywriters, they can take a very dulled talking points and the messaging, which is tend to be product specific, and then turn them into a story or using a very creative or humanly way to say it, right? So from product to messaging to the copywriting. Okay, there's actually a flow. So I personally feel that in the current situation, actually a lot of people are going back to the product and then thinking through what are some of the key things. Maybe our messaging needs to change. That means how we talk about product needs to be different. And in terms of product, there's one important element of it, it's pricing. That especially on the SaaS-based platform, that you can see a lot of SaaS-based platform, when they offer products right now, before it was like, oh, 1 week trial, now it's a month. And or they have online courses that they offer that's usually paid. Like for example, Moz Academy, SEO leader in terms of on search engine optimization. In all their courses are actually paid. Now they opened up until May 31st that everything is free. So the product that they are offering, the offering of that specific products are changing, then your messaging needs to change. And that gives a great opportunity for you to actually write a blog in terms of, hey, our offerings are different. We are actually in this together. And let me show you in terms of some of the content that we offer that was pay, but now is free. And these are the reasons why you should do it. So it always come back to your products from my perspective. Which is the roots of the messaging and also copywriting. If your products, especially the offering and the features, are changing, and you need to think how should the messaging framework change to complement that, and then come through some ideas to talk about it in a very different angles. Does that make sense? So from my perspective, I always come back to a product.
Yes, and it's interesting you should say that, because we've had, we are. It's almost important to resist panic, and to say, and to just say that, we still, even if driving revenues is our most important objective right now, that is not the biggest problem that is in the mind of my target audience.
Yeah.
And really step back and say, I need to continue to be engaging. And it's not a case of me just rushing out and say, oh, buy us, because that's actually
no, that's not my point either, by the way. That's not my point.
Absolutely. That's absolutely, I'm sort of saying that the creative, even if the imperative is to talk about the product, it's essential to position it in a way that's very engaging to the audience. And I think that's an absolutely strong and valid point. Yeah. And on that note, I know that we've all been discussing pieces of B2B marketing content that we find interesting and creative. And should we do a little bit of show and tell?
Sure.
I love this piece of content. This was an interactive comic that they created, where they talk about, if you remember, we were all using Internet Explorer. Maybe all of you are too young, but I remember those days. And, we were using all kinds of other browsers. Remember, it was a much more fragmented market, and therefore search and everything. And then you would go onto a browser, and then you would do a search function. You would go to a search engine, as we called it then, and so on. And now Google is a verb. Let me Google that for you, right? And this interactive comic that they created, it was not targeted at end consumers. It was targeted at developers. It was targeted at people.
Yeah, I can tell right away it's developers, yes.
And at people who would integrate the Google search function within their websites. And it just spelled it out in the most beautiful way. It's not cutesy at all. It may be a comic, but it's, I should have turned off my Slack notifications. But anyway, it's not cutesy. It goes into tremendous amounts of detail about the technology, about exactly how the process is managed. You'll see over here how the browser process is managed, etc. And it's a comic that is 39 pages long. Look at that. And I got to tell you, this probably says too much about me and more than I should probably be sharing. But I went through it. I read it and I enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Anu, now we know how geeky you are. Good, good, good. Join the crowd. Join the crowd.
Please. Just right from look at them. Look at the people in the comments. It's just so.
I love the way you say, look at this masterpiece. Yes.
It's my Sistine Chapel of marketing, you guys.
And that's the reaction that we should hope to get. The reaction that you have right there is just, you know, the gold medal for a marketer.
Here, here.
Yeah, pretty much. True.
Yeah, and so yeah, that was my piece of content. What do you guys think of it?
I love it.
Please
Your
love it.
enthusiasm is infectious. So I think if we took a few minutes to read it, we would love it as well.
Yeah, I just find it so. Yeah.
I don't know about that, Ruth. I don't know. After 3 pages, I might be like.
True, true. But wait a minute.
It goes back to target audience.
It's the developers, right? And what better medium than a comic book to attract a developer? Let's face it.
True. That is true.
How much pushback the marketing team must have got? Do you imagine at the beginning when they said, "Hey guys, let's do a comic book"? And people were like,
the marketer was like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Exactly.
Maybe.
And it was great.
And that's the example of knowing your audience. That's
absolutely, absolutely.
Great example.
So that was me.
Okay.
Ruth, you want to go next?
Shall I? Okay. So I will share my screen here about a 1-minute video that has garnished nearly 50,000 views. Now it's been
Adobe
around for a while, and I will run through it, but it's a story, a total story told in 1 minute.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Daniels.
Look at this. What's this?
The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
Yes, sir.
I need more trees. More trees? I'll get you more trees.
Hey, take a look at wood pulp.
Whoa. Everything you got on wood pulp right now.
He really loves that thing.
Now, of course,
that's what is called
Adobe.
Expected.
Adobe has all the marketing budget.
Marketing Cloud, yeah. And also
Adobe Marketing Cloud has all the budget you could ever want to prepare a TV level, you know, broadcast commercial level creative here. But they've also captured, I think, a set of audiences that would find this pretty funny, and a reminder to all of us that we have to be careful what metrics we're using for making business decisions, and they do it in a funny way. So while this has been around since, let's see, 2014, so that's 6 years, I still find it engaging and a great example of how a business situation can be described in an amusing way that is not offensive. Although I don't know whether Encyclopedia Britannica is offended by this or not, but I think Pam and I would both especially find it funny when the Japanese pulp and paper manager is going "Motto, motto." It's just hilarious. So I hope you're all amused by this the same way I am. I sort of feel like Anu right now. I'm pitching my favorite the same way she was, and so now I guess I'll hand the mic over to the next one of you.
All right, it's going to be my turn. I'm going to share. And before I share, I just want to let everybody know that obviously Ruth going for the grander, kind of like a commercial. I'm more like a practical, like some of the presentation that we are doing, and how can we add a little creativities into it. All right. Okay, here we go, and share my screen. So can you see my Chrome right now? And see the one I'm talking about, Smarter Planet. They use icon and pattern. All right, that's just the points I made earlier. There are two I actually want to share, and this is basically a course that offered by Ahrefs, and they are SEO tool, very similar to Moz. And they actually created kind of like a 4-hour course and 10 lessons, but each one of them actually have a 4 sub lessons, if you will. And I love the way that they do their presentation. It's not just a normal presentation that in terms of having bullet points, but they add certain colors to it. They add certain creative elements to it. When you are watching the video, you are not bored. Okay, so, and I want to show a couple minutes of it. Right here, talking about, it's a keywords like going to a bookstore, right? And you are looking into how to set up a business online. You want to buy a book, right? And that was in magazines. That's my target audience was reading. Therefore, I was in the airport. I bought that book. It could help me understand them better. So this is just talking about like, hey, and then all of a sudden that book is right there, right? And they are reading it, and he was in the airport at the time, and they're looking at it. So for this specific piece, obviously it's literally, this is a course. So rather than going through like slides after slides after slides, bullet points after bullet points after bullet points, and they inject a certain, when they inject the stories into it, they also have the visual to complement that story. So that's one way. And there's another one, this is kind of interesting, I like it as well, and they're talking about how the ad budget that will actually, it's very important as a part of content promotion and reach out to your customers. But the way they do it, and just watch it very quickly, right? They show that you targeted for specific customers, and say, you only target to 1%, and then use a GIF in terms of like your ad budget is not doing very, very well, what's happening, right? So again, right here is about, it's still a presentation, right? And we all do presentation, right? And from time to time, it's okay to add some sort of GIFs, some sort of creativities into your presentation to line things up a little bit. So while Ruth was sharing with everybody in terms of, if you have a nice budget, what you can do, I am showing something that's a little bit kind of like practical and a cost effective. All right, so we complement each other. All right.
Okay.
So back to you, Anu. Oh, Jennifer, I'm sorry. Jennifer, next one's you. Sorry.
Yes, and because technical difficulties, my screen's going to be added in magically later. So my example, as y'all are now seeing on the screen, is an IBM interactive white paper, and as you can see, it's about airplane Internet of Things. And while this could be boring and not sexy, as you can see by the use of the visual airplane, being able to control it going in and out and see the different parts. It's also with the sound, you feel like you're actually near the plane. And I felt like my hair was blowing just reading it. And as somebody that writes a lot of white papers that I think nobody reads, this was a great way of making it feel real and a part. And so I have a sheet, and I added a second example that I think is relevant to the times. And while it was a B2B example, a B2C company, it was a B2C example, a B2B company could have done this. Modsy, as you can see, what they did is it's a home decorating company, but they added in Zoom backdrops they have the Golden Girls house, they have the Monica's house in Friends, and any company could have done the Zoom. Actually missed a great opportunity because everybody's now looking for things behind them. And this was a relatively inexpensive way to make headlines for a smaller company to add Zoom backdrops that were funny and relevant. So I think that that's something to think about as well. And in the current climate, we could have gotten away with it.
Just in time, Ruth. Just in time. I know you are like flying in the space. It's good.
In fact, one of the clients, they've created custom office backdrops. So they all have branded office backdrops that they use on Zoom calls. Quite interesting. That's a lovely example. Amazing. Isn't it? I've been writing down things as you guys have been showing them to me. So it's really inspiring to see how many people if people put their minds to creativity, how much can be achieved. And it doesn't have to be, large scale or small scale or targeted here or targeted there. It's just a case of just pulling things together and making it happen. And sometimes pushing it through the organization and saying, let me test this. Let me prove to you that it works and making it happen. Well,
let me test it and make sure that it's not working. I don't know.
Exactly.
Social media, while you have to be careful not to be offensive across the line on social media, it is a good, inexpensive way to kind of test if something's going to be effective.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. Well, we've been going now for quite a while, and I was thinking that, it would be great to have a sort of a takeaway for our viewers, just to see how, what would you want to leave people with in terms of creativity in B2B marketing?
I would just summarize by saying that we have to remember that our target audiences are human beings, and they can be appealed to with emotion, with humor, with other creative, traditionally, other creative techniques, and we shouldn't shy away from trying them in today's world.
I guess the one thing I would like to leave with the audience is obviously creativity is very, very important. And I know that a lot of time in the enterprise or the team environment that people will have this perception in terms of like, oh my God, it's committee driven type of consensus. Actually, depending on how you leverage your team members, and creativity also come from brainstorming and also team discussion. So if you actually have a certain kind of creative ideas, I think from my perspective, maybe you can enhance it by talking to a different team members. Of course, you have to kind of understand what each team member's strength. Like there are some people that you can go to and get some ideas about creativity. There are some like, no, you don't go there, right? So gather ideas from your team member. Another thing is just complement Ruth's point of view is testing. Actually, it's important when that you have a specific idea, test it. And Jennifer is right. And using using any kind of social media to test it is not expensive, but again, does require time and efforts.
My takeaway is while you're thinking about creativity, is to really also remember that the whole purpose of content marketing is building trust and building a relationship. So any creativity that you're using, to make sure it's for that purpose. And a lot of that comes, as was said before, by Ruth, is by making sure, remembering our audience is human. So use the creativity to connect, build the relationship, and build trust. But just keep that at the heart, because that's the heart of content marketing, is building trust in a relationship, and be sure to keep that at the heart of our creative endeavors as well.
Good. Absolutely true and valid points. I mean, I can't fault any of them, and people should live by these rules. And I just have one more point I'd like to add. Do more comics. No, that's not what I want to
I like that.
My point is, people need to fight. You need to sometimes fight for your ideas and be ready to demonstrate that they work. and it's worth it if we all do that. Anyway.
Very well.
Great.
Well, thank you all very much for your time and for your
Thank
insight.
you,
I
Anu,
feel
for
really
a
privileged.
totally fun discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ladies.